Showtime! The Capital G show starts right now.
What's up YouTube, Capital G here, talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! And video games today, but probably not in the way you're thinking about. I won't be bringing up any of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Video games, but rather some of the coolest Easter egg references that Konami has spun into the game through our card pool. Never forget that Konami is first and foremost a video game company, and although Yu-Gi-Oh! Brings home a lot of the bacon, it seems like they've never forgotten their roots, and that's pretty cool because as a kid from the 90s, I vividly remember growing up on a lot of their great games like Rocket Knight Adventures, Batman Returns, Metal Gear Solid, Turtles in Time, and the Simpsons arcade game, just to name a few. And while some of these are huge franchises that Konami doesn't actually own, they definitely have referenced some of their other classics many times over. The irony is, the harder Konami seems to try, the more that these obscure Easter eggs go over 99% of the player base's heads, but I think that they're still really interesting. Now, just to set some guidelines, although Konami has referenced many video games through Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards, I'll only be sticking to games that Konami themselves either published or created. So even though Bite Bug is clearly an homage to Pac-Man, that's a Namco game and it won't be on the list. Without further ado, welcome to the top 10 Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards you had no idea are actually from Konami video games, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Hierarchy. Number 10, Blue Thunder 45 from Thundercross. Let's get things started with a souped up space fighter from an arcade game released all the way back in 1988. If you don't know a lot about gaming in the 80s, just know that a ton of developers, Konami included, were still trying to cash in on the whole Space Invaders Galaga craze, where basically every other game was some type of outer space journey to kill as many aliens as possible. This usually involved shooting colorful lasers or some nonsense like that. The game only had 7 levels, but hey, when you've got weapons as cool as the boomerang shot, which also had ricochet firing, you won't hear me complaining about it. Number 9, Flintlock, Flint Missile, and King of Destruction Zexax from Zexax. Released in Japan in 1991, if you've ever played a side-scrolling shooter like R-Type, you probably have some idea what this game was like. For anyone who hasn't, well, you're basically a courageous hero who pilots the Flintlock ship in hopes of rescuing a blue-haired princess by the name of Irene, who hails from the planet E-Squared. She's being captured by the evil Lord Clown. Now, you're probably thinking, that sounds like a really straightforward and common storyline, but where things take a weird turn is when the stages start being punctuated by cutscenes of Princess Irene crying out for help while she is tortured. Yeah, it's some pretty strange and dark stuff, but not nearly as strange as the game's ending, where, get this, the Flintlock sends an orb into the atmosphere of E-Squared that morphs into a naked fairy that saves the planet. Yeah, and also King of Destruction Zexax is he's the main villain of the game, so there's that. Number 8, Ultimate Baseball Kid from the Yugioh Powerful Pro Yugioh franchise. It's commonly known that the Japanese like baseball, and I mean really like baseball. They have their own professional leagues, and they've even produced MVPs in the MLB like Ichiro Suzuki. So conventional wisdom would tell us that baseball video games, yep, they're pretty popular as too. In fact, the Yugioh baseball franchise is still actively running today, with its last game being released on the PlayStation 4, PS3, and Vita last April. This is especially impressive as the series debuted all the way back in 1994, making it only 1 year younger than the world-renowned FIFA soccer franchise. Number 7, Nanobreaker, based off the game Nanobreaker. I know it's not very creative. This one's a little weird because Nanobreaker, the card, definitely references the video game of the same name. What makes it weird, you might ask? Well, it's because the card is based off Jake, the main character of the video game, who is male, while the card is clearly female. But the similarities are definitely there. She's got the cybernetic suit, the same hairstyle as Jake, and of course the Nanoblade, which, if you haven't guessed it by now, is what the game is actually named after. The sword, not the actual main character. Now, I could spend the next 20 seconds explaining the plot of Nanobreaker or some sort of interesting details about the game, but quite frankly, the game was hot garbage. So if you really want an action hack and slash release for the PlayStation 2 around 2004, 2005-ish, do yourself a favor and get Devil May Cry 3 Dante's Awakening or Onimusha 3 Demon Siege. They're way better, and yes, I own both of them. Number 6, Getsufuma and Ryukoki from Getsufuma Den. Don't feel bad about not knowing this one. This game's 29 years old and originally was only released in Japan on top of that. Getsufuma Den tells the story of a young warrior who ventures in search of 3 legendary blades that have been stolen. Getsu needs these 3 swords to enter the lair of the demon lord Ryukotsuki. And just a quick FYI, Ryu isn't your normal demon. He's really pissed off at the world he's escaped from hell, and he plans on conquering the entire planet. Now, through the help of the spirits of Getsu's 2 fallen brothers, Getsu vows vengeance against the great lord who killed them. Fun fact, before you look at Getsu like I did and think, wow, she's a total cutie, you should know that Getsufuma is 100% totally a guy. If you're wondering how Ryukoki fits into this, well, remember that demon lord I was just talking about who's trying to conquer the world? It's him! And fittingly, he's the final boss of the game. It's also rumored that Disciple of the Forbidden Spell could be one of Getsu's fallen brothers. Number 5, Tactical Espionage Agent from Metal Gear Solid. Metal Gear Solid. Now this makes me feel nostalgic. 1998 was a fantastic year for gaming. Don't believe me? Google that shit, bro. A 12-year-old version of Cap G would probably tell you that this game is at the top of the list. Those innovative stealth mechanics, the riveting story, the highly advanced AI at the time, and of course my favorite part of Metal Gear Solid, the thrill of reloading during battle. How many people are actually going to get that reference, I wonder? For the most part, I'd like to think that most Yu-Gi-Oh players caught this card that is clearly a take on Solid Snake, the game's lead hero. And for anyone who has seen the box of Metal Gear Solid, you should know that it even says Tactical Espionage right on the cover. Konami, generally speaking, you're pretty good, but this one wasn't that subtle. Number 4, Goigoi the Gallant Ninja, Sosuke Samurai, and Lady Ninja Yae from the Goemon/Mystical Ninja franchise. The Goemon franchise, another one of Konami's long-running series that spans multiple generations. These date all the way back to 1986, with the latest entry being in 2011, and this series has racked up a staggering 40 games to date. This series sees Goemon as the main protagonist, who is best described as being a hot-blooded, if you don't get the reference, watch Yu-Gi-Oh! V, man of Edda, with a strong sense of justice and will. Yae, who is a Konoichi who works for a secret organization of peacekeepers, she's usually the voice of reason and the most level-headed member of the group. And last but certainly not least, Sosuke, who is a robotic ninja who often joins Goemon on his missions. Being a robot, he often fails to grasp the concepts of irony and humor in situations, but he's very helpful. Number 3, Vampire Hunter from the Castlevania franchise. Even if you're new to gaming or really young, chances are you've at least heard of the Castlevania games. Sure, they didn't translate all that well into 3D, but those 2D side-scrollers were gaming royalty back in the day. I'm talking titles like Symphony of the Night, Circle of the Moon, and Harmony of Dissonance. Those are some of the best games ever made. Now, the card Vampire Hunter references the Belmont clan, a family of vampire hunters which was started by Leon Belmont in the year 1094. Vampire Hunter is most definitely Leon. The hair, the whip, Dracula's castle, and the background of the card art, it's all uncanny, and it's definitely a sneaky nod to one of Konami's most known video game franchises. Number 2, Ayatsu, Soyatsu, Koyatsu, and Doyatsu from the Parodius franchise. Alright, so this is where things are gonna get kind of weird. The Parodius franchise is basically one giant parody of the Gradius video game franchise, which Konami also owns and makes. The Parodius games are full of crazy Japanese culture and humor, as well as references to other Konami video games. Everything from giant half-naked women as bosses on many of the levels to tons of other cameos from like Dracula, from Castlevania. Even Goemon himself shows up in some of the levels. Now, if you're wondering, Oyatsu, Soyatsu, Koyatsu, and Doyatsu are actually stickmen who fly around on paper airplanes in the game. Again, keep in mind, Japanese humor. This actually explains a lot about those weird card arts. Honorable mentions include Space Mambo from Space Manbo and Scramble Scramble from Scramble. Number 1, Gradius, Victory Viper, Lord British Space Fighter, Jade Knight, and more from the Gradius franchise. Despite the fact that Konami has much larger and more known franchises like Metal Gear Solid and Castlevania, Konami really loves referencing Gradius and Yu-Gi-Oh! How many references are there, you might ask? Yeah, try about 20 plus of them. In fact, all of those level 4 machines that I just mentioned, they're all playable spaceships in the game. And don't worry, I've got more examples. Solar Flare Dragon, Ducker Mobile mobile canon, hell, even the entire BES archetype, it's all from Gradius. Why so many references? Well, it's because the Gradius franchise is over 30 years old, and without its success, classics like R-Type and Ikakaruga might never have actually been created. Konami knows this, and that's why they pay so much respect to the franchise. So let me know what you guys think. Did I do a good job? If I missed out on any of Konami's other video game references in Yu-Gi-Oh, leave that in the comment section below. If you guys enjoyed the video, do me a favor and give the video a big thumbs up. It actually took me about 7 hours to do the research for this fucking video, which is way more than I put into my normal videos. But thank you guys for watching as always, and subscribe if you have not already.